It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm so impressed with what the group does and the outreach efforts and how effective it is. When I was invited to come, I called a very good friend of mine who's very familiar with this group, and he said, they're fantastic. You got to go. So thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to be speaking today about...
How many people do you expect?
The topic I was asked to address was, what was it like serving as the ambassador to Israel for the most pro-Israel leader ever? For those of you who aren't sure who I'm talking about, that would be
great. I'm going to go grab a hair elastic for a second. And
he was the Prime Minister of Canada from
say Happy
2006 to 2016.
Okay.
And
thank you.
It was Stephen Harper who appointed me in January 2014 to represent Canada to the State of Israel.
Shalom and welcome to a new live stream from Me Israel for Fred. MIF is the largest non-religious, non-partisan pro-Israel group in Europe, defending Israel in Norway, Denmark, Sweden and Iceland. Usually we communicate in the Scandinavian languages, but in our video archive on YouTube and Facebook you will also find numerous interesting interviews and lectures in English. Have a look and make sure you subscribe and get the notifications of future live streams. And as you know, the like button is not far away from you. Just click it now. Yeah, did you do it? Great. I like you too. You already got a taste of our guest today. Vivian Bercovici is a lawyer, an academic, and a former ambassador of Canada to Israel. Today, Vivian lives in Tel Aviv. She recently gave birth to stateoftelaviv.com. a new website with in-depth reporting and analysis from Israel-based writers. Vivian Bercovici, founder and editor-in-chief of State of Tel Aviv, is joining us in 1 minute. But first, when Vivian spoke at the MIF conference in Oslo in October 2017, she was asked why people hate Israel.
So I'll answer, thank you for the question, which I don't have an answer for, but I'll answer it the way I answer my children. Because with two of you in the room, how could I presume to answer it? And if Dennis Prager can't, well, he tried. I say to my kids, I'd say, ask them. I don't have an answer for why. All I know is, my own tiny little experience, right? Like a little grain in the universe. I was to this, I was to that, because people don't like Jews. Not everybody, but people don't like Jews.
I'm ready.
We're too integrated, we're not integrated enough, we're too religious, there's always a reason, and I'm out of trying to understand the why. I'm holding my head high, and let them come at me. I'm not done with my former colleagues yet.
Hello, Vivian. Good to see you.
Great to see you, and great to be here. Thank you.
I remember your visit to Norway and MIF 5 years ago, and when I heard about your new initiative, I thought it was time to catch up.
Couldn't agree more, and I appreciate you having me. I can't believe it's been 5 years, and I'm kind of disappointed. I was looking forward to hearing what I'd said. That would have been fun, but I'm sure we'll find a way to recapture the moment.
Vivian would like to have heard the clip that I just showed where she answered. I think you said that why people hate Israel is, for in many instances, it's not easy to find another explanation than they hating Jews. Have you found a better explanation in the last 5 years?
No, I think that at the core of the issue, problem, phenomenon, it's anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are inextricable. They're very enmeshed. So yeah, I'll stand by that.
Yeah, good. So what have you been doing for the last 5 years?
Good question. I've been primarily, I'm involved. I no longer practice law. I did that for 25 years in Toronto. And then I served as a political appointee. So I was asked directly by Prime Minister Harper to be the Canadian ambassador to Israel. And I was in that position for 2.5 years, which was just an incredible honor and privilege, and also a heck of a lot of fun. And then once Justin Trudeau was elected Prime Minister, it was understood that I would move on because I was a political appointee. And so that was almost 6 years ago to the day since my service ceased. And since then, I've been involved in private business as an advisor, primarily to companies doing business in Israel, Europe, Canada. Do a lot of work in medical cannabis, a lot of political writing. And now I've, as you put it, given birth. I was waiting to hear what I've given birth to because it's been over 20 years. But I've now given birth to, I've established the state of Tel Aviv.
Yeah, congratulations. Mazel tov.
Thank you. And that is where my focus, I'm no longer writing for anyone else. This is my baby. I'm putting all of my energy into growing it and getting the word out.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more. I already saw that it is a website and a Twitter profile. Have you already established presence in other channels?
So yeah, look, I'm a bit old school, so I have this fabulous little team, my wingmen, I call them, hockey metaphor, working with me, and they're the real digital kind of, analytics, I think they call it, all that stuff, right? I'm more focused on the content. So yes, we've established a presence on Twitter, which is the only social media I'm on. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook. And we're working with a really carefully thought through strategy. So we don't want to be like this overnight thing. We don't want to bombard people with notices and with tweets. We're working on a slow build that's thought through. So we've established ourselves. We launched a week and 2 days ago. So, but we have a nice following. We're getting some good traction. We're getting attention, surprisingly, from quarters that I did not expect it, at least not this early. And one of those is within Israel itself, from the Hebrew-speaking media, which is really, really interesting. And even in the last few days, we've been approached by some NGOs that work with other countries, where English is not the predominant language, but they're very engaged in Israel and think it's important to understand. And if I may, it's exactly kind of what part of the vision I had for this site, publication, coming podcast, is that based on my experience, and I've now been here for 8 years, Israel's no longer, the tiny, besieged, embattled. I mean, it's not that they all love us, but we're into the next phase of Israel. It's a regional power militarily. It's a global power in terms of innovation and tech, which gives Israel an outsized presence and importance internationally in business, and pick your field. And my working assumption is that there are many sectors and groups and demographics that are not Jewish, that have a really strong interest in understanding this place much better than they feel they do from current sources. So that kind of feedback from these NGOs and others is sort of exactly what I thought out there. It's a little earlier than I thought.
So how often do you aim to publish articles? Like several times a day, or?
No. So first, really a few important kind of, ground rules or principles. We're not a news site. There are enough of those out there. I have no aspiration or desire to compete. So you want your 24/7 fix, go somewhere else. Our thing is analysis, the best analysis. And if I, I aspire to be kind of, the best of the New Yorker as I remember it from the 80s. Longer analytical pieces, long reportage, the kind of stuff that sucks you in by its storytelling, political analysis. We're dropping an interview tomorrow that's just spectacular. I just finished editing it. So I think you'll find, so that's number one, we're not a news site. Number two is we aspire to be a truly pluralistic platform, meaning people who write for us, who come on the podcast, may have strong points of view, but the publication as a whole will work hard to ensure that a whole range of points of view are represented. Okay. And that's from the Arab communities, from Jewish communities, from Druze communities, English, Arabic, Hebrew. We are working hard to recruit a diverse kind of cohort of writers, and we translate them so that we can kind of collapse that language barrier and bring to you in real time the people who are actually influencers and important voices in Israel, but people outside of Israel don't have access to them. So not partisan, not ideological, pluralistic, not a news service. Those are the ground rules.
Great. I mean, this is what we in MIF are after, like English, in English language, good sources in Israel, and that's why I was so keen to have this talk, because friends of Israel all over the world need a website like that. And obviously the neutral ones, or those who are enemies of Israel, need it even more. But yeah, there is a need for education. So it's great that you can do this. And we'll talk to Vivian a little bit later about her the first stories they have published, and the best business model, and her dream, where the website is going in the next 5 years. But if you, as you viewers, have any questions, please type it in the comment section, and I will try to pick it up. And if you want to send a greeting to Vivian, or in any other way participate in the stream, so please join us. Oops, that was a click error from me. It's
Can I just address one quick thing that you asked me about the frequency of publication?
Yeah.
Before, because I know while people are sort of gathering their thoughts, and so this is one of the wonderful things about the digital world, that, you know, I'm learning some of the limitations and constraints, and also some of the freedoms, and learning to embrace the freedoms. And one of them is that we actually don't have to be beholden and tied to a strict production delivery schedule, right? Yep. And I think if anyone, I've been examining my own digital use kind of habits. We are, however, going to be dropping content, like written content, realistically at least twice a week. And I think it's a nice pace, and it's not too much, and they're longer pieces. You know, sometimes we may feel that it's important to do it with greater frequency if there's a war, God forbid, or something like that. But the digital printed content twice a week minimum. We will expect in the coming month be launching our podcast. So I'm not committing to that, but, and one of my wingmen will give, I'm going to be in big trouble for saying it publicly, but that's the plan. Yeah. And so then things will become a lot livelier, I think, and more, you'll feel like it's more regular, but again, not bombarding. Yeah. You know? Nice. And the podcast will be on Spotify or YouTube, everywhere. Or both? Everywhere. Yeah. Good. Everywhere. I don't know. That's what the tech, the young guys are dealing with. So, but then how will you make money on this? Because you need a business model. Of course. So this is a for-profit enterprise, which was very deliberate. Again, we're independent. And so, you know, as soon as you set up as a not-for-profit, you got a lot of donors usually who may want to be more engaged in the content. The startup model is we have seed investment. So adequate capital to function for some time. I expect that we will raise additional capital in an A round in the next few months. I'm already working on that. And then we will build a revenue base from a combination of subscriptions, from the podcast, from advertising, and we have plans of other areas that we would like to move into, but I'll share those when it's a little more formed and appropriate. But, you know, if you target a niche and if the marketing is done well, there is a sound business model. This is not philanthropy. You know, people pay for The Economist and they pay for all kinds of publications. I got a list as long as your arm. People pay for quality now. They understand, you know, we used to say a few years ago, oh, you can get everything for free on the internet. No, actually not.
Yep. I was looking at your team, and your editor is David Hassany, is it?
Correct. Yeah. I'm actually
He's the brother of Joram Hassany. Yeah. Because I just finished his brother's book. Yeah. Which is great, by the way.
I've got to read it. You know, David is doing actually mostly translating.
Yeah.
I've assumed much more of the editorial responsibility and recruitment and all of that than I had anticipated, and I love it. So I'm not complaining. It's you know, it's a lot of work, as you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, especially when you're starting, you know.
So to give people a little bit appetizer and tempt them to go into stateoftelaviv.com. One of your first stories was regarding the relationship between Yair Lapid and Nathalie Bennett. I think it was a fascinating story. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, happy to. So yeah, we thought a lot, obviously, about what are we going to launch with. And I mean, the government, I'm going to assume a certain degree of knowledge on the part of anyone tuning in, because, you know, this is a kind of specialty channel, so to speak. The relationship between Lapid and Bennett is fascinating. They're alternate prime ministers in this exceptional coalition of political parties representing, you know, Islamists and far left to far right. Bennett historically has been considered to be a hard right figure and politician. Lapid, a centrist, center left. And they joined in this alliance, that they call it, of brothers. And they were motivated primarily by a very, very strong belief that the era of Bibi really must come to an end. You know, that's no secret. Everybody talks about that openly in Israel, that they believe that he was dividing the country and that his ongoing influence was corrosive. And that's really the factor that drove all of these parties together. They shared that view. So what's interesting is, how did these two meld? Why did Yair Lapid, who I believe had 19 seats out of 120 in the fourth election a year or so ago, why did he say to Bennett, who only had 6, okay, you go first as prime minister? That was their deal. So it's a fascinating, you know, politicians don't often put their egos to the side like that, which I think it was very gracious, very grand move on the part of Lapid. But if he didn't do that, he knew that Bennett wouldn't come in. So they apparently, according to people who really do work with them day in, day out, they really do have this very familiar and friendly and good faith bond.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of it is the common purpose to oust Bibi. Part of it, I think, is that they've just gotten to know one another, and they've become friendly and they like each other. They're both, and I know them both personally from my former job, and they're both really great guys. Great sense of humor, high energy, great English, fun, smart. There's another side to it, though. and this is politics. So, you know, for example, in the fall, in my view, Bennett acted rather overly quickly to a particular COVID alarm bell. And it was in November, I believe, and within 24 hours, he shut down Israeli airspace, like almost more aggressively than at the outset. And people, myself included, because my daughter in Toronto got caught in that, and she hadn't been here for years at that point. People were very, very angry. And what's so interesting, this is just one of many examples, is Yair Lapid was nowhere to be seen. Yair Lapid was nowhere to be seen. And we talk about this in the article, that he looked at the outset, according to people who were interviewed for the article, and he knew that COVID is a dog's breakfast. It's a political loser, right? You can't win with that file. And so he just kind of disappeared himself. So, you know, he's very clever at knowing when to go away. And the official line was, at the time that this happened, he was in France and the UK, and he was working on the JCPOA thing, and, you know, on convincing the Europeans not to work with Iran on trying to arrive at a deal. So his line is, hey, I'm out there saving the country, right? Don't worry, you're in good hands with Nathalie. So the dynamic between the two of them is explored, I think, really, really grippingly by Udi Segel. And Udi Segel, I'm sure that 99% of the people watching us now or later have no clue who Udi Segel is. Udi Segel is one of the most famous television journalists in Israel, right? And he is so about politics, and he has such strong relationships. And so I thought, this is a really important issue that people wonder about all the time, like, what's with that crazy government over there? So I thought, let's go to the heart of it and let's get a star. And that's what we did.
Great. So he is still a TV journalist, but he was happy to write this article for you anyway.
Thrilled. I mean, he anchors one of the two main newscasts, okay? And he's a political analyst. And he's a great guy. So the journalist culture here is quite different from other places, in my experience, in that you can be a full-time employee with a major TV outlet or print outlet, whatever. But because the market here is so small and the interest in Israel is so strong, many, many journalists are able to freelance, not on a regular basis, but they're able to, you know, do other work because there's a demand for it. And the market here is just too small, you know, for the media here to sustain some of them. I mean, we've got some real superstar journalists here.
Yeah. We have so after you visited us in 2017, we have started work in Denmark and in Iceland, and last year we also started in Sweden. And I
can speak in any of those places anytime. I love the northern countries. I'm a Canadian girl.
Yeah, that would be great to have you back. And our Danish director, she is asking if you plan to do any articles going into depth with how international media distorts reality in Israel, for example, when it comes to the relationship between Israeli Jews, Muslims, Christians, and others.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you will find that was one of the huge drivers and motivators for me to get into this, because I was writing for media in the States, here, and in Canada, and I found some of the constraints very frustrating. Okay. Yes, we will absolutely be dealing with that. Sometimes we will write sort of, you know, head-on articles providing some insight and analysis. And other times it will be woven into an article. But let me tell you about one feature that will be on the podcast. It'll be a regular podcast feature. And I will be working with a very well-known in Israel journalist with a major publication whose name I will not announce now. And what we will do is take the story of the week, okay? What we think had the biggest impact internationally. So a week or two ago, it was the killing of the Palestinian journalist Shireen in Jenin.
Jenin, yep.
And I mean, the way in which that has been covered by various outlets is something we are going to be writing about in coming months. We're waiting for inquiries to come forward, but here's what the podcast is going to do. We're going to have me, my journalist friend, and we're going to look at a story and we're going to say, okay, here's how Haaretz covered it, or here's how Jerusalem Post covered it, and here's how 2 or 3 key international outlets covered it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just say, for example, the New York Times probably covered it very differently than anyone in Israel, including Haaretz, which is considered to be left-wing. So we're going to invite those correspondents for a roundtable for 15 or 20 minutes and say, okay, here's what you wrote. Why did you decide that that was the most important thing to convey and not these facts? And have a real lively discussion. Bring back, the vibrant, robust, pluralistic town square that I grew up on. We used to be able to have civilized discussions with people with whom we disagreed. So that's directly to the point asked by your Danish speaker. That will be a regular, and I can't wait to start that. I think it's just gonna be fantastic.
Yeah,
so
that will be fascinating.
Yeah,
but do you think that the editors and journalists will actually accept your invitation?
Interesting. So another journalist here said that to me, like, okay, Viv, so basically you're asking journalists to come on to a show to be like torn apart. Well, no. You see, what that reflects to me is this weird silo world we live in now. No, it all depends on how you manage the discussion. And if we manage it respectfully and we listen to one another and we are able to say, okay, I hear you, I don't agree. I think not only is that possible, when people see that they're treated with respect and we really want to engage, that they absolutely will want to come on because it's exposure for their point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but from the reality in Scandinavia, many journalists and leaders of humanitarian organizations, they don't want to. They are boycotting Israel, including websites called stateoftelaviv.com. I mean,
I guess they won't be participating then, but
no.
I mean,
you can talk to the serious ones.
It's not just the serious. I think there's a level. Yeah, serious is actually not a bad word. I mean, there's a level. If you are a liberal in the classically liberal sense, which all of these, the use of progressive is a very misused term these days, as is liberal. But, classical liberalism is about embracing knowledge, right? Doesn't mean you agree with it all, but you are open to hearing it and discussing it. And if people, that's exactly one of the reasons why I say we're non-ideological, we're non-partisan. If people are not prepared to even discuss, then you're right, they won't come on my platform. But I think that we're all going to be surprised. And I think that if we bring on quality people with well-formed views and knowledge, they will want to engage. So let me prove you wrong.
Yeah, sure. That will be wonderful. We have to bring in more information. It's because many people have never heard the Israeli perspective. At least that's the situation in Norway, at least, like where you have school books and media where the best arguments from the Israeli side is like consistently under communicated or not included at all. So I want to talk to you in a moment about Canada-Israel relations and where Israel is going. But maybe first speak a little bit about the situation in Europe and the war in Ukraine. I saw you had an interesting piece in how Putin and Zelensky have been using Israel's Prime Minister Nathalie Bennett as a messenger man or negotiator, if you will. How do you see that issue moving along?
So first of all, I love the way you put it. You know, we put it in a slightly more elevated way. We referred to him as a mediator, not an errand boy, but there are many out there who use that kind of language. First of all, I got to say, it's a fantastic piece. It's by Moav Vardi, who is another marquee, very well-known journalist here. He's very deep. He's very thoughtful. I mean, he just wants to get everything in, and he really sweats the detail. It's a beautiful piece. He went into a story. He dove into a story where everybody was kind of yapping, but nobody was kind of really pulling it together into a coherent story. And I love that piece. We talk about, and what it does is explore, of all people, of all leaders in the world, Naftali Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel, he's the mediator. I mean, it's extraordinary development, right? I mean, I think we all reacted that way. You know, so there's the question, was it real? Was he being used by primarily Putin, possibly? And all of these issues are explored in how it came to be. The consensus from those actually in the know and involved in the process is that there may have really been a window of opportunity in which to negotiate some kind of diplomatic solution. But then, you know, the catch is that that diplomatic solution sounds like it was basically terms dictated by Putin that were unacceptable completely to the Ukrainians. So, I mean, I think that's dead. I think that what comes out in the article are the views and opinions of a number of, you know, seriously knowledgeable people about how significant that was in elevating Israel's stature from a diplomatic perspective. You know, Israel kind of stepping in as a convener, as a leader, as opposed to kind of, you know, just getting beaten up in the UN or something. So a very different kind of position for Israel to be in. And frankly, quite analogous to what's happened with Israel in terms of business and tech. You know, they don't look at us, the world doesn't look at us, oh, we have to send, you know, more Israel bonds or buy more oranges. It's not a place to pity in the way it might have been 50 years ago. So I think that we'll see how that develops. The next installment of that piece, though, that Moav is already working on is, okay, so now that the mediation thing is over, and in part because Israel had to come out against Putin and Russia and align with the West unequivocally, what's that going to mean for Israel's future security interests, particularly in the war theater in Syria? So I think I've more than answered what you threw out to me, but it's a great read. Like, I know I'll say that about everything I publish, and I mean it, but like, this is a great read.
Yep. So go to stateoftelaviv.com. When you gave a summary now, I realized that I need to read it in detail.
You do. And you know what else you need to do? You have to look, I have to say this, I'm a big believer in aesthetics and physical beauty, I mean the beauty, and I think that good aesthetics make any content more accessible. And since we're putting out pretty serious and longer form content, you know, it behooves us to make it more accessible, inviting, draw you in. And so we put a lot of work and thought into the art. So pay attention. And we're trying out different artists and different things. And I love the idea of the art really complementing the written word. And it's also going to be a showcase, already is, for Israeli artists who otherwise would not have exposure.
Yeah, nice. So you, for several years, you were the Canadian ambassador to Israel. And how is the relation at the moment, and where do you see it go?
So I think that, you know, I mean, the relations between Canada and Israel, they're there. I mean, you get the boilerplate, statements out of Prime Minister Trudeau and whoever's in the Department of Foreign Affairs at the moment, whoever's the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because that's changed frequently in the last 7 years. Israel's a friend. It's just boilerplate. I have no official connection anymore, so I can't speak to the nitty gritty of what's going on. I can tell you that on the ground, there's not much of a profile or presence. And I don't think that Israel and the Middle East is much of a priority for this government, the Canadian government. I mean, this is a government that has demonstrated in the last 7 years that they're very big on what I would call woke virtue signaling. Lots of talk about, being feminists, lots of talk about climate change and protecting climate and reducing carbon footprints and all that. But they're not doing much. Yeah. And, it's taken the Canadian public a little while to figure that out, but they're actually really figuring it out now, and things in the Canadian political landscape are a little tense. Israel just doesn't matter. It's a absolute no. They're not motivated by principle on any foreign policy issues. From my perspective, I don't consider feminism to be a foreign policy, kind of basis for a foreign policy, and I am a feminist. So they just kind of avoid it. They really avoid the Middle East. So in fairness, they, during the first years of Justin Trudeau's administration, he had to deal with Donald Trump and, keeping the Canadian economy afloat with the free trade agreement and things like that. So, he's been a little preoccupied with America and climate. It's just not important to him.
No. I see. So the next question is, and probably the final question, maybe we'll have a discussion about it. Where is Israel going? And one of the viewers also in relation to that, one of the viewers asked about the Abraham Accords. For example, the free trade agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
You touched about it in the beginning, that you're saying that now Israel is into a next stage. It's going well for Israel.
Better than it has. Everything's valid.
Yeah. So there is this expression "State of Tel Aviv" that you named your website. I think, isn't it? Some Israelis fear that in the end Israel will be only the state of Tel Aviv, and that maybe they are losing the periphery. And do you have any ideas about that?
Well, I have so many, but I'm going to answer first the Accords issue. Okay, the Abraham Accord. Just respond to that. There's a fantastic, and really, I mean, your listeners might think we planned this. I swear we didn't. But we're dropping tomorrow. That's, digital lingo for publishing. We're dropping tomorrow an extraordinary interview. I just finished editing it. It's fantastic. With Ron Dermer, who was the Israeli ambassador to the States for 7 years through both the Obama and Trump administrations, and under his stewardship, that's really where the basis kind of was established, and all the negotiations were done for the Abraham Accords. And he makes some really insightful comments about what has happened, what's going on now, and what he sees coming in the future. So, shout out, look at it tomorrow. You won't be disappointed. It's a great interview. And he's interviewed by a very good friend of mine, Ruthie Bloom, who's just a superb journalist. So I think I'll leave that at that. Go in and have a read, and feel free to sign up for our list so you can receive emails in the future. With respect to the name, we had another name chosen that the investors liked, that I liked, and then we had some trademark issues, so we had to pick another name, and it's a whole funny story how we did. But State of Tel Aviv, it's hilarious. Like, you say, oh, aren't people worried, that it's going to shut out the periphery one day and it's just going to be kind of, Israel really will just kind of be Tel Aviv. Everyone you talk to has a different understanding of what that phrase means. So during the Bibi years, it was often thrown around like, oh, all those leftists, and I'm in Tel Aviv. I'm not a leftist. All those leftists in the state of Tel Aviv, like we were this autonomous region that did whatever we wanted. And, other people use it in terms of kind of, oh, Tel Aviv, like, sort of the way people talk about Toronto in Canada or New York in America, and probably Oslo to a degree, Norway. Those big capital cities are never really truly representative of the broader country and population.
Sure.
So, I said to one person, they objected to the name, and it was someone who's sort of right-wingish. And I said, well, why? You don't like it because it sort of suggests that we're left? He says, no, not at all. He said to me, and this is a really smart guy who runs a very big organization. He said, no, it's the idea of, Tel Aviv being detached from the rest of the country. And, the most controversial thing on our day of launch was the name. I'm not going to read that. It's another leftist publication. I said, do me a favor, just try to block out the name, read the content, and over time, judge for yourself. The bottom line is, it is controversial, it is catchy, it looks great on the graphic, and picking a name is so hard.
Yeah.
And, we didn't want it to be this heavy kind of Jewish name or Israel name. You know what we wanted it to be a little fun, and it is ironic.
Yeah.
And irreverent.
And the more we talk about it and discuss it, the more people will be tempted to visit stateoftelaviv.com.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Was great to catch up, Vivian. Do you have is there anything else you want to say to Scandinavian Friends of Israel?
I do. I would thank you for that. So just a couple of very quick comments. One is I really and truly do love Scandinavian countries. And I travel there often. I tend to summer in Finland when I don't go to Canada, because you guys we get the cold, we get the lakes, we get the nature. And I really miss that. So one year when I was thinking, what's the closest I can get to Canada without going to Canada for a summer holiday? And I ended up in Finland. But I've traveled quite a lot in all of the Scandinavians, and you live in beautiful places. You speak really interesting languages, you eat great food, and you're nice people. So thank you all for your interest. And lastly, you said at the outset you were going to ask me to sort of share my dream with you, 5 years from now. Where do I see it? In my dream, I see it as an established platform that people turn to for authoritative, reliable, smart writing and analysis on Israel and the region. So think of me as your, Economist of Israel, or Economist meets Spectator meets New Yorker. Pick your publication, but that's the level to which I aspire, and that we will be a brand that screams quality and authority in writing, in a podcast, and other stuff, because I do have plans.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And I hope that many years from now, we will still be able to link and use you as a source for our work in Scandinavia. And then we will look back to this interview with joy, the first week that you launched the project. All the best.
Thank you, and don't wait 5 years for, I'll come back sooner, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much for the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Bye-bye. Litt
Thank you.
bye.
Ciao.
Grunnen til at jeg støtter Israel og er blitt med i MIF, det er fordi at informasjonen vi får i norsk media er så ensidig. Og vi får ikke fram den hele sannheten om den konflikten som er i området.
Jeg er medlem av MIF for å prøve å få en bedre forståelse av det reelle bildet av Israel, og hvordan det israelske folk ser på konflikten i Midtøsten, og for å få et litt mer helhetlig bilde av det.
Jo, jeg er medlem av MIF fordi jeg mener at Israel og jødene har rett til sitt land. Det givende, og du blir jo ofte utfordret på det. Men det som også utrolig bra med MIF at de gjør et veldig godt grunnarbeid med å hente god informasjon, så argumentene selvfølgelig på vår side. Aldri vært viktigere å stå opp for Israel.
Det viktig. Det Midtøstens eneste reelle demokrati.
I Norge bildet på Israel så forvrengt at den jobben MIF gjør helt nødvendig.
Jeg er veldig glad i MIF og har blitt mer og mer engasjert, og jeg er stolt over det arbeidet MIF gjør. Jeg synes at MIF taler til alle, og så er det jo selvfølgelig politisk uavhengig og religiøst uavhengig, så MIF favner jo bredt.
Det var jo egentlig bestefar som begynte med det, siden han syntes det var så fælt hvordan Norge behandlet jøder under andre verdenskrig. Ja, så jeg støtter vel egentlig, for jeg føler det blir så feil fremstilt i media da, i Norge.
Det gir et fellesskap og et tankefellesskap og et sosialt fellesskap der du kan få utforske situasjonen på nye måter, og du kan få inn perspektiver og holdninger og gjerne se ting som du ikke ser så mange andre veier. Og du får, etter min mening, et mer helhetlig syn på konflikten.
Til alle dere unge der ute som har lurt på det, så er det bare å melde seg inn.